Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Emily Su.
And I'm Bo Leung. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
CY Leung clashes with pan-Democrat lawmakers blocking funding for its new Innovation and Technology Bureau.
MTR's East Rail line hit by severe service disruption after through train breaks down in Tai Po.
Call for urgent LegCo meeting as seasonal flu death toll exceeds 100. A damaging row has erupted between opposition lawmakers and the government over funding for a long-delayed Innovation and Technology Bureau.
Chief Executive Cheng today attacked the pan-Democrats for blocking an important plan, saying the public could identify each and every lawmaker responsible.
While he accused them of causing great loss to society, the pan-Democrats complained he was trying to bulldoze his plan through the Finance Committee. Speaking before his weekly cabinet meeting this morning, Chief Executive Cheng went on the offensive against opposition lawmakers. He complained that their filibustering in LegCo's Finance Committee was growing more serious and holding up funding approval for many policies involving people's livelihood. He said all his government is asking for is $35 million to set up its long-delayed Innovation and Technology Bureau, which the pan-Democrats are blocking. He urged the public to speak out, saying each and every lawmaker responsible could be identified on live television for wasting taxpayers' money and causing great loss to society. Leung warned that if funding is not approved by the 14th of February deadline to include the item in the forthcoming budget, it will be like a baby dying in the womb. But there was no progress at all when the Finance Committee held an extra 2-hour session this morning to discuss the new bureau. Instead of talking about the actual proposal, lawmakers spent the time arguing over whether the government was right to withdraw 5 items from the committee's agenda to speed up approval for the bureau. Agricultural and fisheries sector lawmaker Stephen Ho blamed the pan-Democrats for the last-minute withdrawal of a funding application to help his constituents. He complained that fishermen's interests had been used as a political tool and sacrificed in the battle between the government and opposition lawmakers. But the Civic Party's Kwok Ka-ki accused the government of hypocrisy, pointing out that 2 of the 5 items were for the development of IT education programs in schools. He asked why they were dropped if the government was truly concerned about the IT sector and pushing for the new bureau.
So they are actually telling a lot of lies. This government is actually without any conscience and without any trustworthy that the people of Hong Kong can rely on.
The meeting was adjourned after 2 hours at the request of unionist Lee Cheuk-yan. Commerce Minister Greg So, who overlooks the innovation and technology sector now, described the session as a complete waste of time.
This item has been raised by the sector, technology sector, for quite a few years already. Frankly, it has gone on too long.
Financial Services and Treasury Secretary Cheng insisted the government has the right to rearrange the committee's agenda.
It's not uncommon at all for government to withdraw an item even under discussion. We've done it before, so nothing unusual about it.
But leading pan-Democrats accused officials of using LegCo as a tool to execute its commands.
I think that the controversy right now is that the administration does not respect the Legislative Council's way of doing things, and they just very rudely, very violently interrupt. I think all of us should do our best to uphold the integrity of the Council.
The row reflects an even deeper divide between the government and pan-Democrats, who are refusing to cooperate because of the stalemate over political reform. The MTRC's East Rail line was hit by a severe service disruption for 2 hours after a through train broke down at Tai Po Market Station this afternoon.
Trains between Hong Kong and Lo Wu had to stop at every station for 5 to 10 minutes or longer, and passengers at some stations were forced to wait for nearly half an hour at a time. ATV's Winner Wong reports.
This mobile phone footage was taken by an ATV reporter who experienced today's severe disruption firsthand. His early afternoon journey from Hong Kong to Tai Po on the East Rail line took a full hour, with the train stopping at every station in between for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. Announcements explaining the delay and informing passengers about shuttle bus services were made only in Cantonese, no English and no Mandarin, throughout the crowded trip. The disruption was caused by a through train heading towards Guangzhou. It broke down with around 300 passengers on board just as it was pulling into Taipo Market Station at around 2 p.m. A section of the train stretched back into the tunnel as it remained stuck on the track. MTR staff were quick to respond, but it took 2 hours to resume normal services. Due to ongoing construction work at 2 platforms, a single track had to be used for trains heading in and out of Taipo. That resulted in crippling delays along the line. Trains between Fotan and Taipo Market ran at 20-minute intervals, while frustrated passengers had to wait for up to 25 minutes for trains from Taipo Market to Lok Ma Chau. About an hour into the breakdown, the stricken through train was towed to its proper stopping position along the platform. Power had to be switched off, which meant there was no air conditioning on the train, and some passengers who felt unwell needed medical attention. By the time the through train was able to resume its journey, it was 4 p.m. The MTRC apologized for the major disruption, saying it was due to a system failure. Just recently, the MTRC reported that lengthy service disruptions had doubled last year and promised to invest $3 billion to improve its performance. Winna Wong, ETV News.
Also locally, a Hong Kong University poll shows the popularity of pan-democratic lawmakers is still falling after last year's mass protests.
And the number of people killed in the current flu season has soared past the 100 mark. ATV's Alison Chan reports.
Severe flu has claimed the lives of 12 people over the past 24 hours. This takes the number of fatalities from the seasonal virus to 111 since the beginning of the year, prompting the lawmaker representing doctors to demand an emergency meeting in LegCo tomorrow so that some urgent questions can be raised.
Do we have sufficient wards, preparation, beds arrangement, ICU care arrangement, and also whether we have preparation like the banning of the school if there is any major outbreaks happening in school, particularly in the kindergarten and the child care center.
Kwok warned that public healthcare resources will be severely tested during the Lunar New Year. Pan-democratic lawmakers are continuing to lose favor with the public following last year's Occupy protests, according to the latest University of Hong Kong poll. LegCo President Cheng has the list of the 10 lawmakers the public is most familiar with. He's followed by his pro-establishment colleagues Regina Ip and Tam Yu Chung. The next 7 places are filled by Pan-Democrats, with the Civic Party's Ellen Leung at the top, but most of them saw their ratings fall or even hit a record low. According to the polls, the popularity of opposition lawmakers continues to fall after the 79-day protest, while the ratings of their pro-establishment colleagues appear to be recovering. Supporters of League of Social Democrats lawmaker Leung Kwok-kong accompanied him as he arrived at Eastern Court this morning for a pre-trial hearing. The radical legislator has been charged with 1 count of common assault. Leung is accused of slapping a woman in the face following a city forum discussion at Victoria Park last year. Supporters of the woman also turned up in court because she was charged with disorderly conduct in a public place. Alison Chan, ATV News.
Overseas, Japan has launched an anti-terrorism task force in response to a threat by Islamic State militants.
The extremist group, which said it killed 2 Japanese hostages, has declared war on Tokyo and its citizens. In a chilling video released on Sunday, Islamic State warned that it will target Japanese people wherever they are. Let the nightmare for Japan begin, said a knife-wielding man moments before the purported execution of journalist Kenji Goto, the 2nd Japanese hostage Islamic State said it beheaded in a week. The video states that all Japanese people are now targets, said Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga. Terrorism is a real and immediate threat to all of us now. As Japan mourned, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe vowed to seek a way that will allow the government to resort to force to rescue Japanese citizens held captive overseas. As a first step, an anti-terrorism task force was launched today. Security at airports, railway stations and other strategic locations has been tightened as a precaution. In the Jordanian capital Amman, a candlelight vigil was held to honor Goto and Haruna Yukawa, Islamic State's first Japanese victim. There had been hopes that Goto and a captured Jordanian pilot would be freed in exchange for an Iraqi woman held in Jordan for a deadly bomb attack. But before any deal could take place, Islamic State said it had beheaded Goto.
Brazil's worst drought in 80 years has forced farmers to turn to alternatives in the search for water.
Emergency water wells have been dug up in the hardest hit areas and preservation projects are underway. Farmers in southern Brazil, the country's breadbasket, are desperate. They are running out of water. The region, which includes the states of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, is suffering its worst drought in 80 years. With some rivers reaching their lowest levels in more than 6 decades, officials have implemented contingency measures to help farmers and residents recycle water and limit waste. Emergency cash has been doled out to farmers to help them weather the crisis through short-term measures such as digging up wells. Water pumps are then used to draw up water from the ground for use in irrigation and drinking. The New Wells initiative is only a small part in the anti-drought campaign. The Rio state government is also helping preserve natural springs to stop them from drying up or becoming contaminated. Officials have also been installing water purifying tanks to turn wastewater into clean water that can be used for plants. Time now for sports with Cheng.
So any big names on the move in football, Anne?
Indeed, some have gone to new clubs. The January transfer window has closed, but it was a tame affair this time. There was no last-minute rush to buy, and only 13 Premier League sales were concluded on deadline day.
Chelsea were the biggest spenders on